on the first one. This is called a Captive, and basically what this was is it's a tool that is for a physician who's a pathologist. Get to the right. So what this does is this loads in, this is multi-threaded web workers, all this stuff around. This is for cancer, so usually these are lumpectomy and mastectomies from breast cancer. And he's using this to help show patients what's happened. So one of the big things is when they take the cancer out, they gotta make sure they got it all. And then they have to go back to another surgery, so they wanted a way to really help the patient visualize what's happening. This has got like your WebGL in it, so for the viewer, so this is actually this is I think a lumpectomy out. So this is cancer, and the color coding is to show you medial, left side, right side of the body. So that's just for him to do some visualization. You got a lot of features. You can go in here. You should have cancers inside of it. Yeah. So I can lower the transparency, and then you can actually see these are the cancer models. So this is out of the entire thing withdrawn. This is where the cancer's inside of it. Right. So some of these models, I mean, these are full-on 3D scans. They're not small. I mean, they can be 200, 300,000 verts. So we're talking megs of data. So that's one thing. Then another thing you got to be able to do is come up to the image editor, open a file. So we'll open up this one. And here is a 2D scan, so I kind of created like a little Photoshop app. We can come in, scale it, mirror it, whatever, crop it. This is all in there. There, crop and go around, rotate it. I mean, all that kind of stuff he needs to be able to do, so he can go out and build the traces to actually do that. And then from that, I generate the cancer models. So this is all running in the web, and this was great. But one of his problems is that he doesn't want to host this on a website. Not yet. It is in the pipeline, so we started looking at options. So what I ended up doing is taking this application and with just a few clicks of Node WebKit, I now have the exact same app right here. And this is a native browser. Or this is native. This is not running in the browser. And then it has all the same features. And then I can go right over here to this one, to Windows. And I'm running it in Windows. Okay. So completely disconnected. All the files are located and stored right here. This app, especially some of the files, I mean, just the images, the JPEGs themselves are 5 meg each, and there could be 10 or 15 of those. So that's 50 to 75 megs. Streaming that over a cell phone ain't gonna happen, So we have to find a better way to make it work. So this was the solution that we came up with. So getting those heavy-handed apps, the ability to function, is part of the problem, part of the solution. So that was one thing. Another nice thing is offline capabilities. If you're packaging your application inside of one of these frameworks, I no longer have to worry about, well, how does it work in all the different versions of IE? How does it work in Safari, Firefox, all that? I can focus on one browser, build this out, and now I can distribute that. And so now it works on all the desktop platforms, and you don't really have to install, it's just an exe. So it doesn't have to actually get installed into the registry, you can just run it directly. So that's a big
What browser did you choose?
The WebKit is the actual framework, so it would be what, Chrome is now using the Blink backend, so this is prior to Blink, so this would be what Safari and Chrome and now Opera, they're all built off of WebKit. I don't know if Node WebKit is going to switch over to Blink. It very well may, since Google's now developing on Blink no longer. I don't know. I guess Opera may be the only person left that may be doing development for WebKit, or did they switch over to Blink too? Do I know?
I think they stayed on WebKit.
Did they stay on
last
WebKit?
time I read anyway.
Okay, so usually all these open frameworks are starting to switch over to Blink since Google is now using that as their thing, and they're actively developing that open source. So the other thing is no limit to the app size. You know, whenever you start getting larger apps, you start to have problems with the browsers, especially when the size gets too big. You know, especially app cache, things like that. It's kind of an issue. Quicker startup times. I'll show you an example. It won't quite be the same because it's already cached on my computer, but I can get, for a video game that I created to do some testing, 80% increase in startup speed. That's dramatic, right? I mean, that's something to be worthwhile. So let's take a look. So this is starting it web-based. Of course, this is acting up. So if you missed the entire load time, that's okay. So, you know, normally it could take 20, 30 milliseconds to get this going. So this is a full 3D, this has got a ability to use game pads. It's all, I'm gonna die. So this is physics enabled, WebGL, all JavaScript, client side, right? So, I'm gonna get murdered. There we go. So then I can also take that application and go and make it resistance. We'll run it on OS X this time. Right here, start up. And all the files that get loaded right there, you can kind of, you can see this is, everything here is something, a file requested and loaded. So all the models and everything for the application, there's a lot of them. And so it can take quite a bit of time to load up. So, but since all the files are stored locally inside of the application, I don't have to request them over the web. So your load time is dramatically faster. But you can actually, just to prove it works, there it is. Same application. Let's see if I won't die this time. Probably gonna die. But anyway, you get the idea.
Were there any differences in performance or frame rate, or?
Yeah, I haven't seen much. Okay. Now, I tried it on Surface Pro because that was one of the things. It has the integrated graphics, and so I was kind of, you know, Intel's old integrated graphics pretty much blew. It did not work well. Their new integrated graphics, though, is quite a bit a step above. So I was still keeping decent frame rate, not a big difference. So not really. It essentially is the exact same thing running, so you don't really see that hit. But that's a good question, something I kind of thought about. So with this, I'm getting no limit to the app size, faster startups, at least 80%. I mean, now if it's a small app, you're only bringing in one file, you're probably not going to see that big of a deal. But if you're doing something that's a kind of a heavy-handed sort of thing, you will see a dramatic increase in load times, which is, you know, user experience. It's a big deal, right? So it makes it possible. All right. How many of you have ever dealt with application cache? You all read this article?
Yes.
This is a great article. it's worth looking at. You know, application cache is good, and it tries to solve a lot of these problems, but it's finicky. There's a lot of quirks to that API trying to get it to work. You know, one big thing is the actual size limit. That's changing from browser to browser. You know, some browsers limit you to 5 megs, 10 megs. Some will say unlimited, but I mean, try unlimited, it doesn't really work. So, you know, it all kind of has little quirks in it. So, application cache is the solution for this problem in the web, but it is not something that has really fit it perfect, okay? Application cache, what it allows you to do is cache all your files, create a manifest, and when there's a change, it will request, actually when the application rolls up, if there's been a change to the application cache or the manifest or one of the pages in it, then it will re-download all of it and update the application, which allows you to run your web apps offline. But there's issues. If you clear the cache, a simple cache clear won't erase application cache, but there are, depending on what browser, that can happen. IE 10 and above, I believe, are the only ones that work with application cache. So if you need something to go back in IE, it's got to be compliant with that. This won't work. So it's good. It does meet the purpose. And if you're doing something like, say, a Firefox OS, anybody mess with Firefox OS yet? No? Oh, man. Okay. You know, where you're building applications that are running, like even iOS, where you can install them, and it's basically the same idea but built into the mobile, your application cache is a lot more stable. Nobody's going to be able to erase it because it's an app built into the phone or the mobile device. But if you're talking browsers, and you like my where I work sometimes is, you know, IT erases the computer every time you start. There is no application cache. It's a new image every time, so that just don't work. You can't make this happen. So you have to find new ways to kind of get around that. So there's a lot of quirks to it. If you never dealt with it, this is an article well worth reading. You can just type the name and you'll find it. There's only one for it. So it's good. Another really interesting thing is this allows for an entire new set of products. For instance, this is Light Tables. Anybody familiar with Light Table? Okay, this was a Kickstarter a while back. It's a new type of IDE, especially for web developers. It's awesome. It allows dynamic collaboration real time. You can just start coding, send somebody a link, and it automatically connects up to your browser, and you're both coding on the same project, interfacing. No back-end server required. It's all built in. And that's because Node WebKit, half of that word's Node. So how many Node people do we have here? A couple? Okay, so you're at least familiar, some of you are familiar with it. Node is a server-side backend that's all on JavaScript. And so every Node WebKit project has a server built in. So when you start realizing that I have a server right there, that starts to open up more doors for you. So dynamic, real-time collaboration, not a problem. Now this is kind of WebRTC-ish. The idea, and that's kind of what WebRTC is supposed to be about, is you don't have to go to the server back in. But it's still limited in what its capabilities and adoption rates and things like that. So this is a contained solution that gives you that. And if you've never seen Light Table, check it out. You might find it pretty cool. It's extensible, modular, all that kind of stuff. It's a pretty nice little deal. And it's built on Node WebKit. So in the picture here, one of the things that I show is that they're right there. They're showing all of the binaries that they accept. So it's OS X, Windows, Linux, Ubuntu. Well, they built one web app, and now they can deploy on all platforms. That's nice, right? That's the goal. So that brings me to the point of what I wanted to see, what we wanted. So I wanted the dream, the unicorn, all that. I wanted it to be awesome, and I wanted to write it once and deploy it everywhere. And I put quotes around that because if you do this work, you're not writing it once, right? You've got to go in and put shims and all kinds of stuff to make it work across all different browsers and everything to work. But that was the dream. So this is the first step in that for the desktop side. I can write my web app. I can publish it on the cloud. That's we do a lot of cloud-based stuff. But then I can take that, compile it down, create an executable, and ship it out across all platforms. That's pretty awesome. The other thing I didn't want just to be able to ship the app to every platform, but I also wanted it to all be JavaScript. I wanted one language to run them all, right? I wanted JavaScript on the server, JavaScript on the client, and if I was going to start doing desktop-based stuff, I didn't want to have to break out C++. I didn't want to have to go into C# ASP. I didn't want to do any of that, right? Why? If I've already got it working in one platform, why rewrite it? So JavaScript is what I'm betting on, right? That's my goal. So now I have a full stack with Node WebKit. You can do desktop native applications. You can obviously do web applications. You can do mobile applications. Use something like PhoneGap, and you can turn those into native. There's lots of hardware accelerator things like Electra. You guys familiar with Electra? Heard of that? So it's for like WebGL. It's a wrapper. Same thing with Ludi. They do the same sort of thing. So
Did you say Node WebKit?
yes, Node WebKit. We'll specifically get into it. Yeah, Node, N-O-D-E.
Okay.
So I wanted deploying all platforms in one language. I didn't want to have to handle the operation working with multiple languages for the same project. So with this, with Node WebKit, I've been able to make this happen. Now, this was my original goal, and the first thing I tried was app.js. Anybody have any experience with app.js? Yeah, don't worry about it. It did not work. I tried it, and the results were horrible. And it's essentially the same thing that this is. It's trying to take a WebKit browser, run it headless, so that means take everything off of it, and package Node right there in there with it, and get it working, and run it on a desktop application. I could not get anything to work, period. And so I ended up asking this guy, and some of you may know him, may not. If you do, looking at the WebGL stuff, kind of follow that. He had a WebGL racing game, BK Core or B Core. He now works for Artillery Games, kind of. And so I asked him, I was like, did you know, he had been posted on the forums about trying to get this to work. And so I asked him, hey, did it work? And he ended up replying back to me on Twitter, the animation frame, request animation frames, performances were horrible. And they were. It was like getting 1-2 frames a second. So, the question earlier is there a difference in performance? Dramatic. The way they interfaced in with the Node event loop was stupid crazy. It did not work for real-time web apps. It may have worked fine for just kind of basic desktop stuff. If you were going to try to do anything of performance, it was a no-go. It was a no-start. I spent maybe 2 hours trying to get some of my apps to work, and nothing. I couldn't get anything to work. I couldn't get anything to pop up. So it just, at a certain point, I was like, I don't want a Hello World page. I want something a little bit better than that. So I kind of just fell away from it. So then I heard about Node WebKit. This was quite a bit later. And probably one of the differences is who this is run by. This is Intel. Intel open source is backing this project. So that's, it's a lot different, right? I mean, you're going to get some big company back in. It's a big deal. So this is kind of their description. If you go to their Git, this is what they talk about. Node WebKit runtime. It's Chromium and Node.js put together. It gives you direct access to the DOM. It takes your Node environment and your JavaScript environment and plugs them right together. So they're all running together on the same machine. So I figured I'd give it a try, see what it took, how hard it was to convert something over. And Node.js and WebKit, 2 peas in a pod, right? They seem to go together great. So I gave it a shot. So first thing I had to do was kind of figure out, when you start thinking about, I'm packaging a server with my client, that's, how does that work? So there are some things you need to understand. For people that know about Node, Node.js is this server. It's kind of getting a lot of, for the real-time web, it's getting a lot of popularity. It's growing dramatically. It's probably the fastest, in fact, from everything I've seen, it is the fastest by far server-side language growth. Jobs, Sport, stuff are outpacing Ruby, PHP, any of that. Right? Now, it's not the best for static web page hosting. It can do that, but what it's made for is real-time event stuff. So like WebSockets, requests, simple, fast things, breaking it up. It is amazing for that. And the reason it is because it's built using Google's V8, so that's their parsing engine, and you can create custom modules for it. And so NPM, the Node Package Manager, you can do one-line calls and install thousands of modules. Things that are like the computer vision module. You want to do head tracking? No problem. Install CV, and you've got head tracking, just like that. It's just amazing, the stuff out there being written. And one of the reasons those modules are able to build so fast is because of the libview, which allows you to take native C++ and connect it to JavaScript. So JavaScript is nothing more than a scripting language, and it's calling functions inside the browser. So what they did with Node is they now let you create your own custom C++ native code and then connect a JavaScript function to it. Now, crossing the boundary between C++ and JavaScript, you take a pretty big performance hit. So you want to do as much as you can on JavaScript side and as much as you can on JavaScript or C++ side and make that transition as little as possible. But it's actually pretty impressive. There have been some models, especially the MySQL one, where they were getting MySQL to run almost the exact same speed as native. Because with the JavaScript, you're not really running JavaScript, you're just connecting down to native C++ binaries. So Node.js is super fast. It is not something to worry about. There are major companies. Walmart uses it, Facebook uses it. Big companies utilize this. If you're doing real-time chat, you want to check out Node. You don't want to do it on Apache or anything like that. It's single loop, which is one thing, and it's event-driven. So it's not creating a lot of overhead every time the connection's made. And so it's very lean, it's very fast, extensible, modular, all that kind of stuff, all the great. The footprint for Node is very small. So when you start looking at like SoftLayer got, bought by IBM recently and stuff, all these places that are starting to try to do node hosting, a lot of them will do it for free because the footprint for a node server is so small that you can scale out several and take up half the space of other server techs. So it's scalable, it's built to go across partitions, you can scale on the fly, you can dynamically spin off servers from an instance of a node server. So there's a lot of really cool tech with it. Now think of all that, that's all built now into your client. You now have that kind of capability, that kind of communication and ability to connect up on the fly. That's exciting. There's a lot of things that you can do that maybe you never even thought about before, because now you got a server right there. It's fast, small, and can connect up. The modules, there are some modules that are pure JavaScript. Those you can add in with no problem. You just do the npm call, install them in your web project, and you've got them. If you're going to add a C++ module, those can be added, but you will have to add them a little bit differently depending on what platform you're pushing for, because the OS X version is not quite the same compile as the Windows version. But it's still, the module itself has both in it, easily compiles down. So you can take any of the modules that are created currently now out of the thousands that are available and package them right in. Okay, so that's pretty cool. Another really awesome thing is that you have shared JS scope. So normally your client has its own JavaScript environment, your servers somewhere else has its own JavaScript environment. So you're doing a lot of word stream stuff back and forth. Now they can see each other. So you can actually have both of them shared and access the client on the server and access the server on the client. It's shared scope. So that's pretty interesting as well. That opens a lot of doors. You should be able to take your Node.js code, copy it into your client file, and this thing will run. Now, in Node.js, they use the require module to add any module. You require, type in the name of the module, and the file path, and it adds it in, no problem. How many of you use require.js for your clients? Anybody? A couple of you? Okay. You're hosed a little bit if you try to do that. Because it overwrites that word. Now, there's a workaround they can show you online, but you basically have to redefine and point to a different namespace because they add the Node.js require module into the client now. It's built into the package. So if you're using the standard require JS system, you're going to have to make some small modifications to your app. Okay? But that's, in the big scheme of things, it's pretty small. You can easily rename that one word, control find, switch it out. Some really cool things to think about is now, if you do server-side stuff, yeah, question?
Back to your required JS comment. So, so the way I understand is that Node.js has the require JS built into it.
Yes.
Right? So if you're using the current required JS and you remove it, it would automatically work. Because the AMD aspect should still be the same, right?
I don't want to tell you that. Okay, I'm not going to tell you that you can just remove it and it'll work. I don't know 100%. I have my own custom one I built, so I don't use require.js.
Okay.
So, but I know that whenever there's like a one paragraph thing on the wiki for this that says, "Do you use require.js? Click here." Right? And if it was simple as just removing it, there wouldn't have been 2 paragraphs described. So there would probably been just a sentence. So anyway, it was basically like you have to do window.require equals this to store it and then set up another call into it just to re-scope, repoint it, and that's it. It's real simple, but it is a change that has to be made because it won't just work off the bat. So if you also do some server stuff, you probably have these 2 big things that you deal with. One is routing. So routing to get a request in, you have to route to the proper file, set up routing paths and things like that. And that's part of the load process. Well, now you have the client, and it's got the file protocol built in. You have a router built in now, so you don't have to go through that. And templating. So y'all probably do MVC templating type stuff. So if you do that, you normally have to build up your template and stream it back over to the client and then display. You don't have to do that because your client and your server are all right there. So you can literally just template and run it as soon as it's ready. You don't have to serialize it and transfer it over and then repopulate. You can actually get the client data, store it right there, and show the template. So it can speed that up. So, but this takes, this kind of concept, you have to start changing your app, right? You're building something different. You're not building your standard web app. Although that's interesting, that's not for me. Because what I'm trying to do is take an app that's on the cloud and then be able to also deliver it. And I don't want to have to make modifications to specialty versions. So I want to be able to take that exact same code base, compile it down, and distribute it out. But if you start trying to do something a little bit different, a little bit cooler, then you can start doing things a little bit differently, maybe get some cool stuff happening. One of the other final points is the developer tools. Since this is a Chrome browser basically, and you have the Chrome development tools that you can do, you know, the Control Shift J, pull them up, pump them up. Those exist here. So you actually have access to the Chrome development tools in your web app for a desktop application. So I'll show that. So that's kind of nice. I mean, you can start doing testing, breakpoints, inject code, all that stuff. It's the exact same thing right there. That's pretty powerful. Now, one big thing about that you might worry about is that if there's ability to pop those up, then they can go in and mess with anything in your code, right? I mean, that's how the browsers work anyway. But with Node WebKit, they've created the ability for you to scope what the DevTools can see. So they don't have to see the entire application. You can scope them down to returnables and a subset of your API. So that if somebody wants to get around and mess with stuff, they can, but they can't get access to the full thing. So that's cool. That's something that's pretty nice. So what I want to do is I want to show you kind of a demo. And I want to take you through the process of what you'd have to do to actually make this all work. Okay. Everybody does simple chat demos, so I thought I would try to make it a little bit different. So I mean, I've got a server. I want to connect up to it. I didn't want to take a lot of time to build the demo. So what I did is I did the WebSocket server, but then I went ahead and threw, let's do some C++ sockets in there too. Let's connect it to a native C++ application to my browser application, and let's see if we can get them all talking together, right? So I'll use my telnet on here that connects to my Node.js server running, and then I'll pull up a web page, and all of it will be working together. Native, C++ native, web, all run talking. So that's what we're going to try to do. So let's go through the first version, which is your standard web version. Okay. So here I am. First thing I have to do is start my Node.js server. So I've got a JS file called server. Start that up, and there it is. So I've got two things running now. You can see here I've got my WebSocket server is listening on port 88, and I've got a TCP server waiting for TCP connections, just raw TCP connections on port 8000. So that's good to go. I'll come here, do telnet, go back into the callback, connect to port 8000. There it is. Now I'm connected to that node server. Okay. Now I'm going to go here to the chat client, run it, and you can just see that it connected and got the hello from browser. So I'm going to send a message here that says, howdy. Oh, I bet you I'm getting blocked on this server, on this network. Okay. So that worked. So from telnet here, on across, let's see. I don't know why it's not coming back there. Did it earlier today. So, but you can definitely see that I can send something from telnet, and it shows up in the server window, and then it shows up here in the browser. Right, so that's working. No problems there. So we'll cancel that. So shut that. Browser got the disconnection there.
Where did you host your Node server?
Right, it's just right here on my laptop.
Okay.
So I know with the Wi-Fi's, sometimes you
Yeah, they blocked it.
Yeah, so that's probably most likely what's happening from the going to the browser command. It promise you does where I need to go. It's on Git, you can get it. Not a problem. We'll show the code here in a minute. So you can see that's what we're having to do right now. Now, so you've seen that. Now let's look at the native version. Let's run it again. here's that same application. I did make a few modifications to the button so I could show you some extra stuff, and it's running. Now notice, I did not start the node server this time. It's off, right? But now I'm going to open up the DevTools to kind of show you that. So I have a little button there to pop these up. And so we can see right here, it comes up in the browser just like you'd expect, just a window platform. I've got full DevTools control, so I can actually come here. And those messages that popped out over there earlier, now you can see they're popping out to my DevTools console, right? So I can do all my console outputs, like read them right there on the DevTools, no problem. Breakpoints, all that kind of stuff. One thing I kind of set up, was kind of a little thing to watch, is that with Socket.io, if you've ever dealt with it, the Java, the client file is actually served from the server, right? So whenever you connect up, one of the first thing you have to do is request the Socket.io client file from the server, and then it sends it to you in the script. Well, since the server and the client are all together, and the server hasn't started up yet, if you try to request the Socket.io file before the server comes online, it obviously will not work. So I've kind of broken that up so that we can see that happen. So you'll see it here. I'm now going to set up and request initialize Socket.io. So you can see right there, it just popped up. I attached the script to the window, and now I've got Socket.io open. And so now, whenever I hit the connect button, there it is, connected to the server, and on the server here, I got hello from the browser. I can then go, telnet back in, and you can see, it says there I got a connection. So let's get all this moving around. Hello from Telnet now shows up in the native application. And just for measure.
Did you find the console and the debugger helped during the process of developing the application to have this out there?
It's huge for Node, right? Because Node is set up just to be it's a server, so there's no graphics for it, right? There's no side. Now there are some Node developer tools that you can get. I think they're called Node developer tools, probably the modules you add in that basically try to do this exact same thing. So, but whenever you are trying to do this, this is really helpful, right? Because I can set breakpoints now in my server code and then look exactly how that's going over to my client, and it's all right there together. I don't have two different windows I got to open up. It's all working together. So that is one of the really cool things about this, is that your development time should decrease, especially if you're trying to develop two separately. It makes sense. Let me go ahead and package them together, work in a single environment, and get this thing running. Then I'll shoot it out to a server offline somewhere else, and now I'll debug from that. But this can get you fast, get you going pretty fast.
I guess you got to be careful though, if your intention is to separate the client and the server. In the end, you have to be careful not to use any of that shared sort of environment.
Sure, but I would argue that if you're going to do really good JavaScript code, you're already namespacing your stuff to prevent pollution of the local workspace, right?
Yeah.
And if you're not, then that's a danger, a whole other danger you got to work around anyways, because you're adding other modules that could be overriding your globals anyways. So as long as you namespace it like you would in production, you really shouldn't have any problem with it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Besides the required JS thing, that you're going to have a little problem with.
Yeah.
You're going to have to definitely change that, but that's a small one-line change that you really kind of got to do just to get it working.
That's I guess there's no like sort of settled way of doing namespacing in modules. There's several standards out there, right?
Sure.
I mean,
I wouldn't even call them standards, but I would call them preferences for people to do it different ways, whatever makes sense to you.
Yeah.
See, and like me personally, I have my own framework I built, so I don't even, I don't use Knockout, Angular. I don't use that. I have everything I need already custom done to specifically meet what I do. So I don't come into this problems as much, but I know that's a big problem when you're working at a corporation trying to push out stuff all over the place. It's definitely an issue. So, okay, so hopefully you think that's cool. I mean, I think it's cool that native C++ is talking to a browser and back and forth. Kind of just setting it up. So that, it's not glamorous, but it's something. All right, and so we can, and to prove the point, I can come right over here, run this app. And, oh, sorry, that's the wrong one.
Does it extract its dependencies to a temporary directory somewhere that you could go look at while it's running? Or?
For Node, you're talking about?
Well, the overall bundled native app, it has the Node component and the WebKit component and any assets and resources. Are those decompressed to disk somewhere while it's running? Or?
It actually is compressed and then it's two files stuck together and then copied in. So they're running, it's just normal space for the application. So just like any application that would start up and run in memory, you get the same sort of process, right? And you have a browser, so you still have the ability to do like app cache and things like that. You can still do that technology with this, okay? So I don't know if I answered your question.
Well, just all the assets, the images and things that might be built into it, do those get deployed down to the end machine? When you run the executable, do those extract out to a temporary folder or something?
No, they're all, I'll show you here in just one second. Well, actually, it's all part of the actual.
So you literally end up with one exe?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, depending on the implementation, which I'll show you here in 1 second, now that I'm at the right one. So I just want to prove it does work. Here it is. Node TCP, same thing. Fork, so I can start with the tools, all that. All works out. Same process. Now this is virtualization on the Mac, so we get a little bit of hiccups in that, but anyway, it's all there. Pushed out. So, you bring up a good point about the single exe. We're going to get to that for Windows. It's a little bit different than it is for Mac on how to deploy. And that's just basically because how Windows machines run applications compared to how a Mac machine runs an application. They're just different, right? So, now we've gone native. So I want to, next thing, so we'll go full screen just for a second. I want to show you, I hate doing this. I'll hammer my students when they show code up on the screen, there's huge lines of it, but I want to give you an idea of the difference in how the application looks whenever I built it from a web app version to this one version that we showed. I showed you both versions, and I want to show you a little bit difference in how they look. So I've got some code editors that just popped up here. So this is my JavaScript client for the web. Pretty basic, right? Just a socket IO connection. I am setting up some connect and message features to just push out to a tag. That's it. I mean, there wasn't much on the page to begin with, so you can see there was not a lot of code there. I've got a send data function and the shows tools function. Now, obviously, the shows tool function doesn't really do anything if you're running on the website or you don't have a Node server hooked in, but that's it.
What editor is that?
It's actually, you see it here, it's just a data thing right here. This is actually pulling in Ace Editor. I'm just pulling it directly from the web and topping in my stream module. So I just have this little configuration right here where if I want to do a C++ editor, I just click this and now I've got a C++ editor. Yeah, JavaScript. So I just hosed that because now you can't see the code, but it's okay. So that one was pretty basic, but not much of a problem. Here is the server side. You can see the net module up there is your kind of first starting out. It's where just to get the TCP connections, you got to have the basic net module. And so this is the required. You can see how that kind of setting up there. The socket IO module is being added in. And I just tell it to listen on port 8080 and turn off the logging. And don't worry about this. This is not production code, so be gentle. Okay. I know there's some things you should not do in here. This is to do a broadcast. The net module doesn't actually have a broadcast message, so I had to kind of build my own that loops through all of the connected TCP connections. So you can have multiple TCPs and WebSockets all chatting it up. Anyway, it just looks, and if they're equal, if they're not equal, it sends it to everything. So then the basic server here, basically whenever something connects, you just print out the screen. Then I do all my logs, so I try the broadcast. If that doesn't fail, then I say there's an error, just some error handling here. Then I try to do sockets, so this is all connected WebSocket. I do a send on all those. In, close, error, just all that kind of stuff. Socket IO, so this is kind of just your basic app, right? Just creating the server, connecting up my events on what I want them to do. If you do any kind of JavaScript, even if you're not a Node person, you should be able to kind of just follow what's basically happening. Not a lot to it. see the console messages being logged out and connecting on the server. So then, here's this one. So this is the combined. This is the Node WebKit app.js file, right? So if you look at the top here, we're having all our Node stuff, right? But this is the same file that's served into the client that's pulling up in the browser. So I've just copied my Node code right above my client code, stuck it all in the same file, right? This section right here is just to get the dev tools to pop up. So you have to do this NW for node webkit.gui, require that module and get a connection to it, and then I can, when I hit the button, I just do show dev tools. It shows up. So the same thing before, you saw this code before, adding in all the callbacks, and then down here at the bottom, you can see, I told you before I had to take the script out of the header because it was trying to grab the socket.io file before the socket.io server even booted up. So it was put onto a button click just to show. And that's just basically grabbing the script, attaching it to the body, logging it in. And then the connect, the same thing. Talking about namespace earlier, I had to go back. These were called socket in the other file. They were also called socket inside of something else, and so I had a namespace issue. But like I said, this is not production code. I made like a bunch of globals so it was easy to debug.
So did the tool bundle it for you, or you did the exercise yourself to make sure it would work?
No, yeah, it doesn't bundle
Okay.
it for you.
But this is how you create the dual.
This demo, right? And this is because I'm combining the server with this, right? Now I could have just taken my Node.js file, put it in a different script, and then put this, and had two scripts loaded, and I didn't have to connect them up. But I did this because I wanted to bring home the concept that it's all together. There is no separation of space. I can literally copy them all into the same file, and I start up a server and run a client all together, right? Now, if you do separate them out in files, you have to really start worrying about dependencies, right? Because you can't request stuff that's supposed to be grabbed from the server's not started, so you need to do some, when ready kind of things and all that to verify that you're not grabbing stuff from the server until it's done, right? So there would be some changes if you're building a product where you're trying to actually package in the actual server with it. But you can definitely see that it's pretty much the same code, right? I didn't have to change anything until I have one version where they're all split up, but I wanted to do this. I didn't really have to change anything, right? That's nice. App.js, I had to change a bunch of stuff, and it didn't work after I changed it, so it just wasn't good. So that's awesome, right? Pretty simple, run up a server. So if you want to test out Node, you don't have to go through it. You can really just go through this process, create a little Node app, and you can pop open your console, start injecting code just to do it for a test bed, right? And you can have a little test Node server running on your client anytime you need it, just to test stuff out. That's handy, right? Just having something that you can pull up to get to that DevTools editor. All right. Any questions on any of this so far?
That first game that you showed, was that running on the Node.js?
No, that one, well, I have a different one I can show you that has a Node.js backend where you can do co-op over the web, and one guy's controlling the turret of the tank, and the other guy's flying it around, and that's using all Node.js. In fact, if you probably won't load real fast, we're done with these, especially. So. It's another talk, but this one right here, see in a second, once it connects and loads everything up, you'll connect to the server on the back end, and then you can actually have a bunch of people playing together. And this uses Node.
So that's like an upgrade to the other game?
That's actually a downgrade.
A downgrade? Okay.
Yeah, this was the first one, and I presented it at the huge international game conference in San Francisco. And so it was just showing all of the stuff that can connect together to do this. But it doesn't have rigid body physics. It doesn't have a lot of the major performance. And it has one ship that goes around the space station and that big tank. Mm-hmm. The other one has full artificial intelligence, rigid body physics, 2 AI units that chase you and attack you and will try to kill you when we start the game. And so a lot more work went into the second one. But it doesn't have the server feature.
Nice.
The AI kills me off pretty quickly when I play.
Oh,
the
you
second
played it.
game, yeah.
You're the one. Awesome. That's good to hear. I'm glad somebody actually played it. You know, it sucks whenever you spend thousands of hours and nobody looks at it. So that's awesome. Great. Yeah. You know, if you just back up and just keep going backwards, they'll just get it right in front of you. You can just shoot missiles and destroy them. So that's the trick.
The hack.
Yeah.
They don't learn.
Not yet. So that's kind of the files. Just kind of want to show you that. Now I want to talk about the actual conversion process of actually creating these from your web app. Basically, you build this NW file. Now, I know WebKit site is talking about eventually you will just have to send these NW files around because everybody's going to have a Node WebKit app running on the computer. That's not ever going to happen. You're going to have to package these into EXEs and send them. It's not going to happen the other way around. So, well, I'll show you how to build them. It's real simple. It's one line of code, build your file, no problem. One thing these do use is a package.json file. So if you're familiar at all with Node, and there's a lot of other Gits and things like that, that you'll have this package.json, which kind of basically gives you gives you the configuration for it. So it's nothing more than a simple little file that gives you the ability to set all the properties. So for instance here, you set the name, what is the file that's supposed to be called when the Node WebKit app starts up, so index, just to keep it simple. Then you want to set the title, if you want a toolbar, how do you want position, height, width, resizable. You can make it full screen so it starts up as a full screen app, so it doesn't have the toolbar or anything at all. I did that, but then it takes a little, you gotta get it out of full screen and all that kind of stuff. It's kind of a pain. So anyway, but you can easily do that. So basically this one file, you go through and really all you do is you grab one that exists and you just go edit the fields, right? And you just stick it in there, right? So it'll use this file when it actually builds that NW file. We'll grab the package.json and build your file. Yes?
You're mentioning that if you use Node modules that are C++, it's a little different. And I imagine those Node modules have to be, if they're C++, they have to be translated for your target platform, right?
Yeah, whenever you install them, and actually you just do like a global command, and whenever you actually install the NPM module, and it will install everything for you that you need for all platforms, if it's C++. So if you do that, you don't really have to worry about much else. It will automatically take care of it. You just have to make sure you install the module correctly to have multiple build paths on it. Does that make sense?
Yes, I guess, these modules that are out there that are C++ based, they have translations already, or they wouldn't be out there.
That's right.
They have translations for just about everywhere you'd want to deploy.
Yeah, they should, right?
Right.
Anyone that is actually used that you'll find out, like, oh, hey, use this module,
Yeah.
I'm sure it does.
Yeah.
But I can go create a broken module, stick it up there, and nobody's going to take it down.
Right.
Nobody's going to use it either. So it is possible to put broken code up there. But pretty much any of the main stuff you're going to use is maintained by some community or group, and it's all taken care of. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, it's not a problem. But it's a good question. And there is, at the end, I'll show you the link to the wiki, and it's just, you just go there, and it's got a bunch of questions answered, a bunch of demos. You can actually pull down a lot of other people's projects that they have posted up there, and you can open them up and go look at their code, look at their files, and take a look at it. So it's pretty open in that. It's pretty easy to get through. So the package.json, that's something you got to do, right? You got to get that going just to set up the configuration for your application. These are definitely not all of the options that you have. There's a ton of them. I didn't care to put them all in there, but go to the wiki, look at them, you got it. It's a piece of cake. Just a JSON block. Okay. So once you've set that up, you place that package JSON into your web app folder. Okay, so that's what you've got to do is put it in your web app folder. Then you run this one command. So I've got this folder called app right here that has everything in it for my application. It's got the app.js file, which is my client one, server.js file, the index page. Here are all the node modules, so I installed Socket.io, so I installed it into the app, and so now the files are there. It's like a one-line npm, whatever modules you need. That's just the basic node stuff. And then to convert it, there it is. Okay. So I just type in this, and so all this command is doing is going to go through and build a package. It's going to take all those files and link them together in some virtual memory, right? And this may be what you were asking earlier. Okay, so this NW file is that. It's a package of all your dependencies, every file locked into this thing, right? This NW. So I run this. That's it. I now have an NW file. My packages, my app is packaged.
Is that zip command that you're running, is that like running on like a Bourne shell or something?
Yeah, it's bash shell. Yeah, it's just running there. Yeah, and it's native for the Mac. There's a copy command that you have to do on Windows, but yeah, just it's a basic command that exists.
So the Mac runs, your command line is like similar to Bourne shell?
Yeah, it's mine has bash. You can install. I mean, Mac is just a extension of Linux, right? You know, what's it called?
BSD.
Yeah, BSD. So, I mean, you can install anything you want on it, so that's not a problem. But that was easy, right? That one little line inside of the folder created this app NW. That was it. Now, if you had the, app NW app located and you could just run it directly, what you need to do before you start is that you need to actually go to the Node WebKit and pull down the Git, right? And it gives you all the files here. And you will see that you get actually when you build it, you get this Node WebKit app. And so if you've ever done the ACE editor, this is a pretty cool one. Has anybody ever seen an ACE editor? Pretty much if you do any online coding anywhere, this is open. So this is the web app running right here, native. And so you can go check that out. It's pretty cool. Runs all the different things. But anyway, you go grab the OSX node webkit.app file. Just go ahead and grab that, copy it, and throw it into your folder where you want to build it. So I'll go back to here, to the chat. So I built the NW file from my folder, my web app folder, where I put the package.json in. It'll create this, whatever the name of that folder is, that's what it creates. That's basically what that command does. It's just going through, grabbing all the things that end that, pushing them all together, creating one NW file that has them all in there. That's it. Make sure that you don't do something like copy the Git folder with all your commits in it and do an NW on that, because it's a little bit bigger than what it needs to be, because it has all the file versions stored. So, so don't do that. I did that the first time. It's fun.
So that NW file is essentially a compressed archive
Essential.
that functions as a self-contained app. Is that fair to say?
Yes. In fact, so if you use the NW engine, you don't have to, you can just load that in and it'll run a bunch of them. So you can send smaller files. So there it is. So the next thing, you would copy that Node WebKit, and if you're on a Mac, you go to the show contents, and then you go to the resources, and you drop it in right there. Right? There'll be one in it, whichever the default Node WebKit is. It probably says Hello World. I don't know, I forget. Something like that. That's all you do. You drop it in there, then all you have to do from that point is, once you load it, then you just double click it, and then that loads it up. That's it. So that built me a native OSX app for my web. It's basically one command line call and then a copy and paste into there. That's it.
You were copying and pasting in the sort of Node WebKit library.
Right, they give you a default OS X app from Node WebKit, right?
Okay.
Because OS X, the app is really nothing more than just a file system, right?
Right.
And so you just show the contents, and then you go drop it down in there, the app.nw. You have to rename it to app.nw because that's what it's looking for whenever it starts up. It goes to grab that NW file.
Okay.
So this is the NW engine. So you could actually create and modify this where you could go load up multiple NW files and have one application and only have to send NW files. And that's what they say they think is going to happen. But I don't see a bunch of people installing the NW Node WebKit runtime environment and just passing around Node WebKit files. That's not going to happen. They're going to want the OS X version or the Windows version, right? So because of that, every one that you send out is going to have a full-on package of the Node WebKit environment with it. So it's wasted, really, because you don't need multiple versions of that. You really don't need one, and then you can run all the NW files you need from that one, right? But that's just how it's going to happen. Okay. So that is the OS X version. Right? So you drop it in there. So then you can change your icon file, go in and do you can change your package info to go change all the OS X stuff to register it. Now you got to be able to do that. One thing, because with the new Mountain Lion now, if it's not self-signed from a certified Apple vendor, you know, it doesn't start up, and you got to right-click on it, say open, and say yes, I really do want to open it, and then it'll open. So this will happen if you change this stuff because it's not certified, right? So, but if you're a developer and you want to, you can definitely go make that happen. You just got to register.
Is there any way to do code signing on it, or
Couldn't read.
any way to do code signing on it, or encrypt it, or you can't? Somebody.
For the OS X version, I don't think so. The Windows version, this is coming back to his original question about just one EXE and stuff. There is a way, and it's a pretty cool little trick. OS X version, I'm not so sure. But then again, if you're building a web app, you're sending the code anyways, right? So, but if you don't have to send your server, so it depends on how you do that, right? But no, not really. So, because it's the same problem that you have where people say, I want to have a HTML5 game that's super fast and runs, so I want everything on the client, but then I want everything encrypted. Like, the browser's got to interpret it, so it can't be encrypted. And it's the same concept. The browser is running, the file has to be JS, not encrypted JS, right? No way around that. Okay. So that's it. That builds a simple OS X version. So now let's look at the Windows version. All right. I know we got a lot of icons. Don't judge me. Shared desktop. Things just happen. All right. So, well, I guess I can show you the slide first. So that is all there is to running it in OS X. What is that? You just run that app, and then you copy paste it into the contents resources of the OS X version, and now you've got a native OS X app. So literally, in 5 minutes, you can take your web app, you know, and have it running native. That's pretty cool. And it just worked. Windows. It's going to be the same sort of process. You take that NW file you created, and now you're going to do this copy command right here, this one right here. What this does is it takes your two files, butts them up to each other, and then returns to you a single exe. Right? So this gives you a single exe, but it by itself is not enough to run on Windows. You got to have some other files along with it. So this is why when you ask, is it just a single exe? Kinda. But we can get it there, and that's what we'll talk about here in a minute. So let's go and show the simplicity. Okay. So here I am inside of here. I've copied my app MW file here. I have this NWEXE, which is provided from the Node WebKit. If you download it, you get the Windows based installer. I then come here and I type copy switch B, and we'll do NW.exe and add to that app.nw, and then we will store it in a file called app.exe. And there it is. Okay. Now, I'm going to copy this into this folder here so I can show you some stuff. Now, here's where on Windows they make life a little tricky. This is some of the problems that happen. If you're doing WebGL stuff, then you, for especially older versions, like this is Windows XP. Now, you have a little bit difference, and I haven't been able to figure out what the problem is yet, but between XP to Windows 7 and beyond, you have a little bit different in the environment. So what you will see in here are some of these are D3, D9, this is DirectX, right? So this is the DirectX. If you're going to use WebGL, it's got to connect to the DirectX, and this environment is emulated, and so it doesn't get the direct connections to the DLLs. So you have to package them in with this. So right here, I can go now and run this app.exe, and it will run fine. This, you can see it's trying to connect up the servers, I can say unblocked, and now the server should be up and running. Should go to DevTools. Good, yeah, the server's running, so we're good. So if you're doing it this way, you have to have this NWPACK file. So you can't just send the exe. Without the NWPACK file, it won't run. So if I copy that back out of this folder and I try to run it, it just will fail, right? So if you're going to do it on Windows 7 or Windows XP or later, you kind of have to create a little install package like you would do with any other desktop application to put all these things in a single file or zip them together or something like that and run it. I mean, obviously I didn't install anything here, so you just need them in the same folder together. That's all that's got to happen.
You have the DirectX 9. What else is in there? The DLLs.
Some of the stuff are like Angle, so the this is OpenGL, just sort of this, comparison going between the two, right? Because you're going from translating from WebGL to OpenGL. I think this is for video-based stuff. Anything that's real-time graphic stuff, you've got issues, right? So if you're doing kind of video, WebGL, anything like that, you've got to package in these libraries. Now, the Node WebKit site gives you a specific list of all of them, how to download, what to stick in there. So it's not a big issue. You can definitely get that later. The big one that you have to have is the pack. So if it's anything other than, if it's not web or graphics related, you just need the pack file. Okay.
How big is like the whole package?
That's a good question. That's a good question. That's actually one of the issues that comes up. Because whenever you put these together, you now have an issue is because it's now got here 40 megs, right? It's got a server package with it, right? And then the server's modules are downloaded and installed with it. So you can't get a little bitty, web app now. It packages the Chrome browser with it, right? Headless, so you don't have all of the stuff with it. But all of that now is packaged together. And that's one of the kind of gotchas that I have a little bit later, is that your file size is going to be larger. You're not going to get it much less than 40 megs. That's as low as it's probably going to go.
Have you tried like like UPX?
No, I've just used like this because this is the default setup for Node WebKit. Now, one of the initial tweet that got me kind of onto this was that they brought up the concept of, let's go here, the Enigma VirtualBox. Anybody heard of that? Ever seen that? This is a pretty slick little tool. What it will allow you to do is grab up all your executables, all the DLLs, everything, throw them in to a single file, and then this will virtualize the entire registry process, the queuing into the OS and all that, and hides it. So it doesn't actually have to install on the OS. It answers all those calls back, returns the proper information, so the application will run as if it was installed on the machine, but it's really running in a virtualized environment. So if you do this, you can get to the single exe, right? So it's very simple to do. You download Enigma VirtualBox here. So I'm going to tell it that my start point, the application that's going to start it, is app.exe. That's what we built out. And I want it to package everything into something called chat.exe, right? So set that up. Come over here. Let me grab all of these. And I'm going to drop them right there in the default folder. And then I'm going to say process. And now it's pulling all the DLLs, building them all together, setting it all up. Give it just a few seconds.
That tool is just for Windows.
Right. Yeah, you can't hide it on the Mac side. So this is, if you do a Windows version, you can put it all together. Now, is it uncrackable? I doubt it. Right. I'm pretty sure if you wanted to, you could easily get in there and get what. Do they want to do it? I don't know. Okay. So that's it. This builds this little guy right here, this chat.exe. There it is. My application's running now in a single exe. Now, so question I get.
You were saying that the typical app runs around 40 megs?
Yes.
Okay, is that, I didn't see the size of the exe.
Yeah.
But was that including the DLLs? Because
Yes.
if it is, I mean,
Oh,
why
no.
can't you just, oh, it's not included?
No.
That's just the exe.
Right, that's the base exe created. These DLLs are still there. So that,
Okay.
see, this one is like closer to 66 meg. So if you have to do any kind of graphic stuff, you got to package the DLLs with it. You're going to be going up to like closer to the 7
Yeah,
meg.
but I mean, the thing about it is, the DLLs can be anywhere as long as it's in your path environment, your path environment kernel, right?
I'm not sure. Maybe you can go into VirtualBox and try to virtualize that, but this VirtualBox machine won't do it. Oh, okay. Different question. So what you're saying is with just the base exe, it has to be in the same folder.
It has, the DLLs have to be.
Yes, for this. Now, you might be able to go and do some rewrites and configuring on pathing stuff in your on your terminal to try to fix that. But the average person is not going to be doing that, right? The average install is just going to, the Node WebKit builds out, it looks for these DLLs right there with it.
Okay, well, I mean, I don't have a problem with that, but typically in Windows, I mean, just put all your DLLs someplace and you put that in your path environment variable and everything knows where to go to look for it.
That's usually true, but because of this is already in a virtualized environment, it doesn't have access to those same path variables as something just running straight native, right? So it's inside of a different environment. So that's where the problem comes in. So saying that, there is something that I definitely want to point out, is that whenever I build out these EXEs, if it's graphics like WebGL enabled, on Windows XP and later, this EXE will not run without all these DLLs around it. It doesn't work. So the Enigma VirtualBox doesn't work for XP, but it does work for Windows 7 and everything before. So sure has something to do with pathing and trying to get connection to the drivers, and they're probably being restricted somehow by going through the VirtualBox. More than likely that's what's going on.
Doesn't work for XP.
Right. Windows XP, you can do it, but you have to run it as a standalone this, not packaged together like this. The VirtualBox stuff will not work on XP if it's graphics related. So, like I said, that's most likely due to the fact that you're trying to get direct connections to hardware, and in the virtualized environment, it's not getting those connections that it needs. Okay, on XP. Windows 7, Windows 8, no problem, works fine. Okay. So once again, that was a single command line call, builds it out, and that's all you had to do to start out with. If you wanted to put an EXE, then you had to copy it out into the Enigma VirtualBox and hit process and come up with a single EXE on that. So pretty slick. That's a pretty nice little trick there.
Did you end up buying the full version of the Enigma Protector?
I have not.
Okay, and you're still able to do all this stuff?
Yes, but yeah, I didn't buy nothing. Open source. All my stuff's free. I use free stuff. So Yes, you just download the basic one, that's all you need, okay? And once again, it's also on the Node WebKit site to what to buy. There's a little, hesitant, you know, I don't think it's the clearest written thing, but it's still there. Okay, so, Penguin VirtualBox, you just copy all those DLLs if you need them into the default folder, get processed, done. So, we've basically shown, once you build your web app, you get that index file, that's a single line of code. It's like 2 things you gotta do, and now you're running multi-platform, web and native on the desktop. I just think that's cool. I mean, just to be able to do that quick. No problems, no issues, just making it happen. So, gotchas. There's a couple of gotchas. Even remember that movie? I'm dating myself.
Yeah.
Okay, one of the big things is the XHR. You're doing AJAX calls because now you're doing calls on the file system rather than the actual HTTP going out because everything's local. You don't get the response 200, which took me a little while to figure out what's going on. Why isn't this working? Because they don't mention that on the Node WebKit site for some reason. That seems like a pretty normal sort of thing. So, like all those files I'm loading for the game, it just kept airing out, and I'm like, what's going on? Why isn't it accessing the server? And then I realized, oh, that's what it is. So I just put an OR in there now. Like now if the response is 200 or 0, let's continue on, and now everything works, right? So you will have to make that change if you're dynamically pulling stuff out from the web and injecting it in, or loading assets or anything like that. Your AJAX calls, you got to make that change. And then, as you brought up earlier, the other kind of gotcha is file size. You do a WebGL app, you're pushing 70 meg, right? You do anything else, you're about 40 meg, right? You can't get it smaller than the 3080 because that's just what it takes. So that is a little disappointing, but then again, you're already doing some, you know, some heavy apps usually, right? So that you're trying to do this for. So that's kind of what that sets it up as. Other than that, those are really the only 2 gotchas that I found. I was able to convert everything else I had. I had a blog post on this and I talk about it. There was another issue I was having with shared workers. If you were at my worker, my multi-threading talk, you know I'm talking about setting up that environment. But after thinking more and more about it, I'm pretty sure what the problem is that the shared worker environment, I'm actually pulling in another file to pull in a shared worker, and I don't think I'm accounting for this in that. So I think that's the issue, because anything that works in Chrome should work in here. It's the same browser up until Blink. Things have changed since then. But before they changed, they have the exact same version of Chromium that was used in Google Chrome. So the dev tools, all that are there, breakpoints, no issues. Okay. So in 10 minutes, you should be, you know, cross-platform. Now be able to do desktop apps, web apps, you name it. One language rules them all, right? JavaScript, go.
One benefit is of our browser is when browsers run in the sandbox, so they don't have access. So are those restrictions still there?
They're lightened. For instance, whenever you're saving a file, I don't know if maybe you don't know if you use the file API, but when you save a file in the sandbox environment, it defaults. It has to go to the downloads folder. But now, whenever I save a file, it actually pulls up the file dialog and lets me pick where I want to go. And there are some of those restrictions that are limited, that are, I don't say they're just gone, right? But they loosen them up in the WebKit, because whenever they do the custom build, they build those features into the WebKit. So if you, I haven't messed with it, but I know you have the Google package apps. If you do that, they have some of the exact same stuff where they're taking their WebKit or the WebKit browser and they're loosening some of those sandbox restrictions because it is going to be running as native, and they're basically doing the same thing with Node WebKit doing that. So you do get some relaxations. Okay.
So what type of apps do you see future people building this?
Collaborative tools. Okay, I can see that real quick. Just because of the fact that you have a server built in right there, and so to be able to just get online and send somebody a link, and you get your socket connection, just like the not LimeWire.
Like to.
Yeah, Lighttail. I mean, that kind of thing.
And you won't be restricted with ports like on the route like we had here, or?
No, because it actually worked. If you saw the native app, it worked, but not the web app, right? So, because it'll still go out on port 80, still do all that stuff, but it can still pass through. Now, if you got IT, depending on, you know,
Yeah.
they can do some magic, right? Mess things up. But most of the time, yeah, it should work, right? So I think that's one big thing. You can open up more windows, so you can do pop-up windows and start creating kind of some cluster effects if you want. So what I see, because one of the big things I do is cloud clustering, specifically dynamic on the fly clustering, right? I want to spin off multiple threads running multiple things. So I can actually load up this application and then figure out how many cores my machine has or how big the GPU is, and then spin off 5 or 6 worker apps from that, and now they take full advantage of my computer, right? So that's some kind of cool stuff with it. Big apps, things that are just, you know, you're not going to probably do on a phone, right? It's just not the right environment for it. I see this becoming a possible way. What I really see it being is that it takes the web developer and opens up a completely new market for you, right? You no longer have to just do web apps. Somebody says, well, I want this to run on my desktop. No problem. You'll create it as a web app and then create the desktop version. Then when they come back and say, hey, I'd like it to access from anywhere, I say, no problem. I'll build a cloud version for you. That'll be this much money, and you've already got it built. Right? And then you host it, right? So I see that happening. And it's just like I had a demo.
You know what would be cool is if you have a right click and install offline version.
Yeah.
That's how actually Silverlight does it, so.
Okay.
That would be one cool. Because right now we have a Silverlight app to convert this to HTML5, and then this way the user experience is still the same when they install offline version, but it installs this instead. That would be nice.
Yeah, I mean, you should be able to do a whole bunch with this. The possibilities. In fact, I was going to show you. Can't do that. This was an example of one of the projects where we were wanting to show off what we could do with the web. We were doing some simulation work for a hospital. And if you just saw, I tried to run the exe package together and failed, right? So, but then I'll run this one and it'll work. So, this was part of it, and they wanted to be able to show this off to people anytime, anywhere, run on the computer. They weren't going to have internet access. They never knew who it was going to be. And so we just said, okay, we'll set this up and break up the speed. I'll run this on XP emulated. But we'll start seeing patients coming into their ED and then start padding around, filling up the weight room and stuff like that. So this is, you can also go to this on the web, but then I package it up for them, send it to them now. Whenever they're out and they want to start taking looks at this or try things out, they have that ability, right? And so, you know, this is kind of nice. It makes me have a little bit more in my arsenal. I can do like live charting stuff on it. You know, this is all my framework that I put up. This console and all this, just handing out. But you know, opens up doors, right? Expand your marketplace, a lot more opportunities. You're no longer, even though I want the web to win, I know web is not always the answer. There are certain times you've got to be able to just do it, or set it on a desktop and run it and not have that connection, because you're not going to have the connection. So how do you get around that? We didn't really have a good way to do it before. Now we do. This is awesome.
This cancer thing that you wrote that, right?
Yes.
Does that run on a tablet?
No, because it's WebGL. Well, I'll take that back. Firefox on an Android tablet would probably run, right? Because Firefox and Chrome support WebGL. I don't know if Chrome is,
Chrome, you have to put a flag on.
yeah, it hasn't gone native yet, but Firefox. So it should run on Firefox, but I don't think I have touch controls enabled for moving the model around. But so there's no reason I couldn't get it there if it was supported.
Because I noticed that I'm seeing tablets like being used in restaurants and stuff.
Yes, and doctors.
Yeah.
Doctors and restaurants, that's huge, right?
And, I mean, I have one, and ever since I got it, I just found it really convenient.
Right.
You don't really need the full power of like a laptop.
Right.
Sometimes, so I'm just thinking there might be a big market for tablet apps.
There is, but this full talk doesn't quite go to that, right? There are other options to get native, and that's when I was talking about Ludi, which is a company, but then the other one I mentioned. This PhoneGap won't convert to the WebGL. There's actually Ejecta. Ejecta, you can copy your web app into it and build you a canvas. And then what they've done is the same thing everybody else does. So anybody that says they have accelerated web apps for graphics, or they support hardware accelerated canvas, so their canvas is faster than any other canvas. All they're really doing is wrapping all of the calls to OpenGL calls, and they're letting your web app run in something just like this, and then just doing the OpenC, or not the Objective-C or the C++ calls on the back end, and that's where the acceleration comes from. So, and that's actually the path for this that cancer app, because eventually they probably will want it on there. They're not going to want it for some other. When they're doing the tracing and stuff, we're talking Zoom. It's not made. The precision you need, you're not going to get with a tablet. I mean, they've got big microscopes they're looking at, and they're moving stuff on, so they need desktop. But the visualization side of it, showing the biopsy, the coloring and stuff, that is perfect for a tablet. Getting people to their hands, having them touch it, is a big deal. So, and that's our path, going through Ejecta to get it onto those. Because it won't, PhoneGap, just, even if you do PhoneGap with canvas accelerations, it's just, especially on iOS devices, because unless it's changed, iOS devices, the web view isn't hardware accelerated, right? They don't have the Nitro on it. That's awesome though, we appreciate that. So if you install it through the web on the home screen, you get Nitro. If you don't, then you don't get Nitro, so all of a sudden, your app that was awesome sucks. So you gotta figure out, there's tricks to get around that stuff, but you gotta work on that. Okay. So, check me out on Twitter. Where is I do this? If people have questions, follow me. The people who play my games, so that's one guy. I have a blog with all the links and everything in there. So I think it's the top hit right now. So if you just go to blog.gametheorylabs.com, you'll see taking our web app to native or something like that. And it gives the links to a Node WebKit to get all that stuff. So check that out. And you can actually download all of the versions of Omega Resistance. You can download the Windows version, the Omega, the EnigmaBox package version, and the OS X version. Your virus protection will screen, because I just put the exe up there. I didn't care. So when we try to download exe, it's going to complain. You don't have to download it. I don't care. But it's up there if you want to take a look at it or check it out. So.
Quick question for you. You mentioned Ejecta is a great platform for leveraging WebGL, native applications, maybe even mobile and tablet or anything as the future of.
Yes.
Where's the compatibility there, and where was the impetus to try and drive through that platform, as opposed to some other device, or coding it all yourself, as you were showing in this presentation?
One, it's a task. It's it's a pretty major task to get that done. And the guy who did it, I forget. Impact. That's right. Impact.js is already a game browser. It's out there, and so basically what he has done is taken this. So I think just recently, I mean maybe 6 months ago, a couple months ago, added the WebGL support, right? And before them, Ludi is the only other company that has WebGL supported with your web app. Now, like I said, basically what they're doing is taking your JS files, copying them over, and running that in a WebKit viewer to interpret them, and then cooking them up to the actual C++ calls native. But this guy and a couple other guys have started working on this, and so it's, if you want 3D graphics on a tablet that can run on an iOS device, you have to write this on your own or use something like this. All of them except Ejecta cost money. This is open source and free, Ludai is a company, and it makes me nervous when they say everything's free for now until we get started. Once you're in here, then we'll tell you what it costs, right? Right now they're just in this beta thing, and they're going to take your money later after you've already put the effort in there to get everything working.
Yeah.
They don't, since this basically they are writing the browser, really, that's what they're doing. So not all of the function calls have been implemented. So you can't just do any canvas call. You don't have a DOM, really, right? It's a canvas object, no real DOM manipulations. Anytime you try to mix the DOM on top of a canvas, doing this technique, the performance gets cut dramatically.
So you'd still need 2 builds, one for Ejecta and iOS, and another one for.
Well, it depends, okay, how you write your code, right? If I write, like my game app, for instance, I have my graphics module, my AI module, my physics module, I have all these different modules, and my game code sits on a level that is not connected into any of those. So it creates an entity, which then calls the build object to create all my modules, right? So my game code should not change, right? But how that graphics object gets created or what it does, well, as I just keep expanding my cores to say now I want to support Ejecta, I just add that in, right? So it's all about good code management, I'd say, right?
Right.
If
Yeah,
you
creating the right package. Okay, that
Right.
makes sense.
So, they have some good demos now. They'll show the 3JS stuff, so they've taken 3JS demos and thrown them in here and shown how they're working and the performance on them, and it's good. Like I said, it's the technique to do it the same way. So on this one, I feel like why not write it myself? It's because I'm going to write the exact same code. So I'm just going to take this because it's not any different. It's the same process.
Yeah, that's actually pretty cool about the Ejecta. I tried playing with PhoneGap and everything else to try and package, 3JS, anything else, WebGL for phones, tablets, and it's just a nightmare.
Yeah, and Ludai is a really good company to do it. They're out of San Francisco, at the H15 Developers Conference that I was speaking at. I talked to them, and they had some good path, smart guys. But their model is they say things like, you never will have to pay more than you make. Great. That's really what I'm trying to do, break even, right? So, yeah, so, that kind of stuff makes me nervous because once you develop it and they publish it out, now, their stuff is great because once you write it, it'll run on Kindle, Nook, Android, it runs on everything because they're behind it testing it. I don't know if y'all seen the latest picture of the Android fragmentation. Have y'all seen that? It's insane how many different Android devices. So, trying to write something out on an Android like that it's going to be crazy. You're not literally going to be able to support all of it. It's just too much.
Yes. I'm on a team that does a mobile web app that tries to support everything on Android from 2.2 up.
Good luck.
Oh, it's an adventure.
Yeah, that's crazy. Yeah, the fragmentation of, it's the greatest, it's the greatest advantage and weakness at the same time, right? Anybody can go get Android, build a device, and it's out there and sell it, right? But then now I've got a billion different devices that I got to support, so it's killer. Screen size, resolution, all that kind of stuff. It's a pain. Processor specs, what it can handle, all that. Any other questions? Okay. This is the first time I gave a talk, so I didn't know how it was going to turn out. Didn't know how much the time was going to work.